I want it to be smooth for you, Don.
I appreciate that. Maybe a couple more.
Well, I got my shot, Mr. President, so we can go back to live meetings anytime you want.
Oh, are you watching?
I got mine today too.
I've had both of mine.
Yeah, Don, you were in the first wave, weren't you?
I was in the one. I was before the first wave, John. Thank you. I'll tell you what I think about that off camera.
You knew you weren't going to get away with that one, Don.
Yeah, you know, I thought Marmy wasn't going to be here. I didn't think it'd be too bad, but no, you have to chip in.
Was that the same wave that sank the Ark?
Oh, that's really funny, Ron. Really funny.
Man, rough crowd. Rough
Yes,
crowd tonight.
It is a rough crowd. Well, those two won't be speaking during miscellaneous, so that'll cut down the time. I got to get a better system for these earphones. I keep knocking them out of my ear.
Procrastinate enough on it, you might not need them.
Say that again.
Procrastinate enough and getting the set, and you might not need them.
Yeah, that's what.
Hopefully.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm cheap. Okay, you ready to go, Spence?
Yes, sir. If you are,
Are we live?
we are.
Okay. I'd like to call this March 15th, 2021 meeting of your Newark City Council to order. It's 7 p.m. Janine, please call the roll.
Mr. Fennell,
Here.
Ms. Hall,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Mr. Labutus,
Here.
Mr. Lang,
Present.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath,
Here.
Mr. Barker,
Here.
Mr. Blake,
Here.
Mr. Bub.
Here.
We have 9 here who are present this evening. Next on the agenda, we have the invocation. Mr. Labutus is going to introduce our speaker for the invocation. Mr. Labutus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to introduce Mr. Josh Sexton. He is the head of school at Granville Christian Academy. And obviously the school is located in Granville, but they have numerous ties into the city of Newark. Their baseball team plays their home games at Don Edwards Park. And the home basketball games are at Fifth Street Gym in downtown Newark as well. And then they've also done multiple service projects throughout the city and partnered with the city for landscaping projects and some painting as well with some of their student projects. So with that, I will yield the floor to Mr. Sexton. Josh, thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the council for allowing me to be on here tonight. Thank you for all that you do for the city of Newark, and we're looking forward to continuing our partnership into the future here as well. Why don't we pray as we begin the meeting here? Father, thank you so much for these people who are willing to dedicate their time and their efforts to taking care of the city that you have entrusted us with, that you have given to us in such a beautiful way, or that you would continue to work in our lives as we seek to walk through the difficulties that we face continually, from the pandemic to the situations within our community lives and the challenges that we're continually faced with. Lord, we ask that you would just continue to give us the wisdom that we need each day, and even tonight as decisions look to be made and actions taken, or that we would seek to continue to glorify you through what we do. Lord, be with the council and their meeting tonight, or that they would seek to please you with their words and their thoughts and their actions, or that you would be honored in what is done in the city and in our country, or may we glorify you. We pray this all in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Labutus, and thank you, Mr. Sexton. I'll overlook that Granville part. So, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. If you please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Spencer. Next on the agenda, we have caucus. That's the time for council to discuss anything pertaining to the agenda tonight. Now I'm going to have Mr. Sasson talk a minute about Rule 11, but do we have anything else for caucus this evening?
Mr. President,
Mr. Lang.
yeah, I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mr. Marmee.
Motion by Mr. Lang to excuse Mr. Marmee,
Second.
second by Mr. Barker. All those in favor signify by giving me a thumbs up. Very good. Pose same sign. Thank you. Mr. Sasson, we'd like to talk a minute about Rule 11.
Mr. President, as we discussed in committee today, these 5 pieces of legislation all refer to one issue, one annexation of property on Hornshill Road. They're here tonight pursuant to Rule 11 with the agreement of Majority Leader Marmee and Minority Leader Blake under Rule 11, and also as an emergency because we are subject to statutory deadlines for addressing this annexation. It's a single property owner annexation. It's been filed as an expedited 2. So we're on very tight timelines that have to be acted within between 20 and 25 days respectively. And so I would ask council with the consent of both leaders to hear those tonight in miscellaneous. And it was my suggestion, Mr. President, that we move these from caucus, that we put them in caucus so they can be discussed at the beginning of the meeting. Then they actually be voted on in miscellaneous so that if anyone is here to comment on these matters, they can do so during citizen comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sasson. I have talked to Mr. Marmee today, and he is in agreement with this. Mr. Blake, if it's okay with you, if when we get to miscellaneous, if you would do these, that would be great. Thank you. And good idea, Mr. Sasson, about moving it to miscellaneous for the citizens' comments. That way, if anybody would like to comment, they have an opportunity. Okay, anything else for caucus? Moving on, next we have the minutes of our March 1st, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion to approve those?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Labutus.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bub. All those in favor, give me a thumbs up. Opposed, same sign. And that passes. We have one appointment this evening. City Council appointing Mark Labutus to the Community Reinstatement Area Housing Council by recommendation of the Department of Development Director, Mark Motter. His term will begin immediately and expire December 31st, 2021. Mr. Motter, would you like to say anything to that?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. We had a situation where Roy Vanata needed to resign from the Newark Community Reinvestment Area Housing Council. And so I have a position to fill. The position is the Newark City Council appointment. And I would like to highly recommend the council would appoint Mark Labutus to this position. Mark currently serves on the Tax Incentive Review Council, and this position complements the work that is done there. So again, I'd like to have council give a recommendation to appoint Mark Labutus to that committee.
Thank you, Mr. Motter. Is there any questions of Mr. Motter? Seeing none, all those in favor of appointing Mark Labutus signify by giving me a thumbs up. All opposed, give me a thumbs down. That passes. Mark, you're appointed. Thank you. Thank you for deciding to do that. Let's see. Next, we have reports of standing committees. We have 3 this evening, one from Finance, one from Service, and one from Streets. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have reports from city officials. We have one from Judge Stansberry, the Licking County Municipal Court 2020 Annual Report. And we may have him come to committee and give highlights of that if anyone's interested. But then you have the report to read, and also one from our auditor, Stephen Johnson, the operating report for the period ending February 28th, 2021. Without objection, that'll be received and filed. We have, let's see, 4 communications this evening, one from Sam and Mary and Marcy Browser, email in opposition of the 21st Street rezoning, which was dropped anyway. We have 3 from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, Don and Sue's Pizza, 645 West Church, one from a grocery on 297 DO Drive, and the other from the Ragtime Band for 325 West Main Street. Without objection, those will be received and filed. And finally, from communications, we have one from Roger Loomis, our water administrator, properties being sent to lien for past due water, sewer, and stormwater bills in the amount of $3,778.22. Without objection, that'll be received and filed. Next on the agenda this evening, we have our first section of comments from citizens. This is a time for you to be heard. This is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. There's one now and one after the legislation. If anybody would like to speak during this first section of citizens' comments, if you'll please turn your camera on so I can recognize you. Give us your name and address for the record, and I will recognize you. Do we have anyone for this first section? Spencer, I don't see anybody except Mr. Lehman. Would you like to speak?
Please, Mr. President, if I could.
Yes, sir.
I am the petitioner for the annexation of 55 acres on Horns Hill Road. It is our intent to, if annexation is granted, to seek residential zoning to do a single-family subdivision with 115 lots. That's what I've got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyman. Do we have anyone else? Spencer, you see anybody?
No, nobody else, Don.
Okay. All right. Again, there's another chance after the legislation. Next, we'll move on to ordinances on the second reading, 21-02. Janine?
Ordinance number 21-02 by Mr. Bub, an ordinance amending the position classification, pay range, and department authorization tables of the City of Newark, Department of Service, Division of Cemetery and Parks by creating the classification of operations manager and setting the compensation therefore.
Janine, are you running the sweeper while you're reading that?
What?
I'm getting some kind of feedback. Just
Oh, yeah?
Am I the only one that hears that?
No, I hear it as well.
Okay,
Yeah?
there we go.
It
Okay.
sounds like maybe your air conditioner.
All right, you've heard the second reading of 21-02. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Buck?
I'll move that we adopt ordinance 21-02.
Motion by Mr. Buck to adopt 21-02.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 21-02? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
yes,
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee? Mr. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
21-02 passes 9-0. Next, on the first reading, we have 21-08.
Ordinance number 21-08 by Mr. Fennell, an ordinance vacating a 16 1/2 foot wide alley as shown on the plat of the canal land as recorded in Plat Book 2, page 20 of the Licking County Plat Records. Said alley is located between Market and Canal Streets and between South First and South Second Streets.
21-08 will be held for actually almost 3 weeks for our next meeting, which will be April 5th. Next, we'll move on to resolutions on the second reading. We have none this evening. And resolutions on the first reading, 21-12.
Resolution number 21-12 expedite by Mr. Marmee, a resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
Mr. Blake?
Mr. President, move to waive the 2-day reading rule on resolution 21-12.
Mr. Blake moves to waive the 2-day reading rule on 21-12. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bub. Mr. Blake?
There's a payout for an employee in this resolution, so we generally like to get those done as soon as possible.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Blake. Janine, please call the roll to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
yes,
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee? Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Barker?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Two-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to adopt Resolution 21-12.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Blake,
Second.
second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 21-12? Janine must have got done sweeping because I think it sounds good now. Okay, Janine, please call the roll to vote. Oh, she's back.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
Yes.
21-12 passes 9-0. Next on the first reading, we have 21-13.
Resolution number 21-13 by Mr. Marmee, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to submit an application to the Ohio Department of Public Safety for an award of fiscal year 2021-2022 funding under the Ohio EMS Training and Equipment Grant Program.
21-13 will be held for our next meeting, April 5th. And next we have 21-14.
Resolution number 21-14 by Mr. Marmee, a resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
21-14 will be held to our next meeting, April 5th. And finally, we have 21-15.
Resolution number 21-15 by Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to sell by internet auction personal property, including motor vehicles no longer needed for public use or which are obsolete or unfit for the use for which it was acquired.
And 21-15 will be held for our next meeting on April 5th. And that concludes our legislation this evening. Thank you. Next, we have our second opportunity of comments from citizens. Again, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. If we had anyone that would like to speak, if you would please unmute and unvideo yourself, and I will call on you. Okay, first, I think we have Dawn. Dawn, tell me what your last name is.
Pettit.
Oh, Dawn Pettit. Okay, yep, got you there. Go right ahead. Give us your name and address for the record.
Dawn Pettit. I live at 317 Mall Street. And I wanted to bring up the sheets business that's coming in at 21st and Mall Street. Okay. I've talked to a lot of the council people about this over the phone, and I want to say that I appreciate them talking to me. I understand that there's nothing that can be done about this business coming in now that it's been rezoned. But I would like to say that if there's anything council can do as far as making sure that safety is utmost here. There's a lot of accidents at Mall and 21st Street, and I think there's going to be a lot of congestion. I'm also concerned about increased traffic on Mall Street, which is a secondary road and has had a lot of speeders throughout the time, and I think this is going to increase. The last thing I want to say is I'd like you to consider that when something's going to be rezoned that's this huge or has the potential to be this huge, that maybe people be informed a little better. It's my understanding that only people who lived within 350 feet of this project were notified. And this has a huge impact on our part of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Next, we have CJ Cook.
Hi, Caroline Cook, 898 Lake Glow Court, Newark, Ohio. And I'd like to agree with Don. That's a very bad place to have a gas station. The only only accident I've had in Newark was pulling out of the gas station on 21st Street. Somebody ran into me. There's always accidents on 21st Street. And this is one of the most dangerous places. And to have another gas station with cars constantly pulling in and out at this particular place, close to the school, it's just the wrong place to have it. And I also appreciate that you didn't allow a gas station where the Family Dollar was. So that was a wise decision. We don't need more gas stations. We need more housing for families, especially low-income housing. And the other question I have a lot of questions about this this annexation on Horns Hill. I just want to know what kind of housing is going in there. What kind of services is the city going to supply to that development? I live in an area where my street has been patched and patched and patched and patched and has holes and holes. There's areas where we don't have sidewalks, you know, and you're not taking care of parts of our city very well. And I'm in one of the better places that's being taken care of. So what services are you gonna provide to developers who develop other places? And I'm also really against the River Road development, but I think maybe that's out of the picture now. So thanks for listening.
Thank you. Deanna Wycliffe.
My name is Deanna Wycliffe, sorry. Address is 362 Cedar Crest Avenue, Newark, Ohio, 43055. And I would like to bring to light possibly some options for better walking conditions, crosswalks, signage for schools a little further out than what they are. Unfortunately, on the 3rd of March, my daughter was struck by a vehicle on Cedar Street walking home from school. She didn't see the vehicle. The vehicle didn't see her because she had to come out between parked vehicles to be able to cross Cedar Street. Now, at this time, the only actual crosswalk that is within walking distance of us, except for down at Everett Avenue, is Clarendon. We see cars fly past that continuously as the lights are on. It's not safe for the children to be walking. And when you're looking at close to 2,500 students in a city walking, I believe that there needs to be more light shown onto this and better conditions for these students that are walking to and from school.
Thank you, Deanna. And
Thank you.
And Mr. Lehman, are you on again or are you okay?
I'm okay. I'll answer more questions if there are some about the Horns Hill, but it's up to you.
Well, if you'd like to add something, go ahead.
Well, we have an agreement with a production builder. The homes we figure are going to be in the upper 200 range. And like I said before, we're asking for 115 lots. We will build city streets. We have agreed to the city to provide a $1,500 per lot impact fee for the improvement of wherever the city would choose to improve, but we would think it would be for the intersection of Horns Hill and Waterworks. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lehman. We have anyone else? Spence?
Not that I see.
I don't see anyone. Okay, we're going to move on to city officials. Mr. Motter, our Community Development Director, and Deb Tegmeyer. I'm going to have them speak right now. They're going to talk a little bit about COVID money, and also we'll have a chance to ask them any questions at this point in time. I know it's a little out of the ordinary, but I think this is probably a good place to put that. So, Mr. Motter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you giving myself and Debbie Tegmeyer from the Licking County Coalition for Care a few minutes to speak on the subject of the COVID-19 CARES Act funds that are being used in our community. Deb and I wanted to let you all know that my department, which is the City Department of Community and Economic Development, the Licking County Coalition for Housing, LEADS, and Licking County Jobs and Family Services have been meeting weekly via Zoom for quite some time. We've been coordinating our efforts to be sure that we are working together in a comprehensive effort to distribute those CARES Act funds as efficiently as possible. We've been concentrated on 3 areas. That is rental assistance, mortgage assistance, and utility assistance, such as sewer, water, telephone, etc. We felt that it was important to communicate regularly and keep each organization informed as to how they were progressing and if there were any issues or solutions that could possibly be shared to better implement the distribution of the funds. We have worked together to create an infographic and a press release, which I sent out to all the council members last Thursday. This illustrated all the community organizations that have been involved in helping the Licking County community and the number of households that have been assisted, as well as the amount of dollars that were distributed. So that's my brief introduction to that. And now I'd like to allow Debbie Tegmeyer, again, the Executive Director of Licking County Coalition for Housing, to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Once again, I want to thank everybody, since you were all involved in awarding some of the initial CARES Act funds to specifically to the Licking County Coalition for Housing. But clearly with the infographic and the press release, we were trying to illustrate how much broader an effort it really has turned out to be. But with the $250,000 that the Newark City Council awarded back in November of 2020, we proceeded and added that to what turned out to be $900,000 from the Licking County Commissioners of CARES Act funds, again, in addition to several other sources of dollars that I can touch on if you're interested. But with that money, we were able to, just within the Licking County Coalition for Housing's effort, assist over 500 households, a huge portion of which were actually in the city of Newark itself. So we were able to get a lot of those dollars out before the December 30 deadline. We did carry some of those dollars forward. So the infographic and information that you have in front of you is actually just specifically for 2020. We intend to provide a follow-up and a final, I don't want to say report, but whatever you need. We did want to at least give you this preliminary information for 2020. And we'll have more information once, and we've actually depleted all of the CARES Act dollars, both from the county and the city. However, the efforts for rental assistance, foreclosure prevention, and utility assistance continue. I'm sure are aware that the city of Newark was awarded some funds, some CDBG CV funds, and we're participating with Mark and his team in order to get those dollars out the door. We are taking applications. Of course, that's specifically for the city of Newark. However, Leeds has received 3 different waves of funds, and of course, we're now waiting to see what the American Rescue Plan, the piece of legislation, multiple pieces of legislation that President Biden just signed. There is additional rental assistance and foreclosure prevention assistance in that bill as well. So we have in front of us lots of money well into 2022. So we anticipate collectively, whether the Housing Coalition is in the middle of it or not, but we will still work collectively to try and prevent homelessness and prevent evictions. It's been a key part of anybody's strategy to mitigate the spread of the virus. But as you also know, when we first approached you about using some of the CARES dollars that you had, it's also been an extremely important effort to try and maintain the rental housing stock in our community. You're probably aware that most of the state and federal housing programs rely almost exclusively on the use of private housing stock. Yes, there are some subsidized housing units around in buildings and apartments, but for the most part, the work that the Licking County Coalition for Housing does every day in terms of either preventing homelessness or helping homeless families and adults and homeless veterans find new housing rely almost exclusively on the private housing market. So what you have been able to do with those dollars is well over 240 property owners in the city of Newark and in Licking County. So it did not end up being a big concentration of 1 or 2 property owners getting all the money by a long shot. we were able to work with quite a few people. And I feel really good about that. And I hope you do too, because it's been an extremely important effort. I do want to acknowledge Judge Stansberry's efforts. He's been extremely helpful, as has Marcia Phelps with the Clerk of Courts, in terms of giving us information, keeping us up to date, and frankly, helping both property owners and those facing eviction to get information in a timely manner so that we could help prevent a lot of those. So without further ado, we were particularly interested if you had any questions about the infographic, about the press release, about any of the information, any of the programs we're doing. We want to make sure that you feel fully informed. And this was our first cut at it. So happy to take any questions. And if we don't have the information now, I'll be more than happy to get it to you. But that concludes my remarks. Unless, so I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm sure Mark does too.
Thank you both. Appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Oh, you guys are a lot better than my professors. Thanks.
Thank you for coming, and thanks for keeping us updated. Mr. Motter, thank you. Do you have anything you want to add? Okay. All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next, do we have any other city officials this evening? Our Honorable Law Director Sasson.
Will pass, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sasson. Mayor Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to congratulate the Newark High girls basketball. While they didn't have a state championship win over the weekend, we're awful proud of them for getting in the finals. Mount Notre Dame that beat them hadn't lost in more than 2 years and is the reigning number of state championship wins in the state of 8. So and it's a powerhouse team. They played a few years ago in the semifinals. That's just real strong and real good. And our girls did just a phenomenal job. If you didn't get to watch or listen to it, double overtime lost by 2 points. And Gwen Stair shot a 3-pointer that bounced off the rim that would have won it in the last few seconds. So it was a really thrilling game, and was not there, but it was able to watch it on Spectrum One. And certainly want to congratulate them for an outstanding year. I'm sure they're healing a little bit from that type of a emotional loss, but I want them to know that we surely are behind them and real proud of them. And with that, I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Bear Boy. That was a tough one. That's for sure. Mr. Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to first off thank David Rhodes for some help on some property maintenance issues that I've been having. I really appreciate all of the hard work that he and his teams do to kind of keep our city up and running and looking great. So with that, I will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I will pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Harris.
Yeah, I would too like to congratulate the Lady Wildcats for a great year. Also want to thank Mr. Hickman for helping me out on a couple issues. And Deanna, if you would shoot me an email, I'll be glad to get with you and talk about the school crossings. Yeah, with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Labutus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to, a couple things. Wanted to thank Mr. Sexton for being here this evening to offer the invocation. Secondly, wanted to congratulate the Newark Wildcats basketball team. That was a fantastic game, and they fought hard and made us all proud. That was a great season. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. Mr. Lang.
President, thank you. So I guess first I'll just say I'm really excited about the announcement of the Newark station. I think there's some really cool short and long-term plans for that property, and it's going to be a really unique and fun addition to the city. I know Mr. Barker's got more to share on that, so I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I'm really excited about that announcement. Ms. Wycliffe, I'm really sorry about your daughter. That sounds like an awful event to happen there, and I hope she's doing okay now. But pedestrian safety is obviously a really, really important issue. And Jeff, I'd be happy to coordinate with you on that. I know it's not my end of town, but working with the engineering team on some other pedestrian safety issues. So I'd be happy to coordinate there. And then I'd also like to thank everybody who came to speak about the proposed development of the Sheets location on 21st, Ms. Pettit, Ms. Cook. I know I received a few other calls from neighbors over the weekend. You know, I share your concerns regarding the construction of this drive-through deli gas station at that location. You know, I think the expected increase in traffic and the backups that may be caused will, you know, at a minimum, it's going to be an inconvenience and a delay, but worst case, if we don't manage it correctly, I think it is going to lead to increased accidents in the area. And I think it's going to pose logistics problems and access problems for our safety forces. So, you know, I think it's important that we manage that well. And, you know, while I don't like it, and certainly I think we were hoping for something a little more low key for the area, I've seen some comments and received some questions from folks. So I think it's important that folks understand that we really only get a say in deciding how a given area of land should be zoned. You know, once a property is zoned general business, the owner can build a bookstore or a coffee shop or put in a gas station, and we really don't have a lot of say. And there's a lot of folks asking me, hey, you should bring in this and bring in that. And, you know, I think it's important that everybody understand that we don't bring in a gas station here or put a bank over there. The different developers that come in, they look to invest in the best opportunity to build a business where they think it's going to be successful. So while we don't think a gas station, you know, is best there, there are folks that do think that, and they're putting their money behind it to make that investment. You know, I think this is a little different than what happened over at River Road or the Circle K. You know, those developers were looking to modify current zoning to complete their project. And I think it's important that folks understand they could still go and build a gas station where the family video is. That plot is already zoned for that use. They wanted to zone the adjacent property. Similarly, over on River Road, they could build 300 plus single family homes. That property is already zoned that way. We just didn't approve the higher density use. So for this property, I think it's important to note that the general business classification already went through the standard process. So what does that mean? It means letters did go out to the folks in the area. There were public hearings that were advertised in the paper. There was review and discussion that happened over the course of, I think, 5 different meetings. And then we looked at the property across the street that has the same zoning, and there really wasn't a big opposition at the time. So I think it's important that folks understand that change was approved with unanimous bipartisan vote of Service Committee, then a unanimous bipartisan vote of Planning Commission, and then finally a bipartisan unanimous vote of Council. So what do we do now? What can we do now? We can ask for review and consideration of the different safety concerns in the development of the property. I've reached out to our engineering team, and they've assured me they're already doing what they can to mitigate those issues with the developer, specifically looking at how many cars can stack up in the drive-through, the curb cuts. We're getting some money from the developer to improve that intersection a little bit. And then I know they will be applying for a zoning variance to reduce the number of required parking spaces. I'm going to be sure to share that information through my social media accounts when I have it. And then moving forward, I know, Ms. Pettit, I think you made a good point, and it's something that concerned me as well. I think, advertising in the Advocate is what's required by statute, but we could probably do more. And so I've already set the ball rolling with President Ellington and our council clerk, Janine, and Spencer to look at how we can improve our communication of zoning applications, and hopefully just all council matters general. Ask that we consider use of social media and as another resource to help improve transparency when these kinds of changes are requested. So hopefully we'll be able to announce more specific plans at our next meeting, but that's something we're working on as well. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Rapp.
Thank you. I'll call a service committee meeting for the 5th. Looking forward to hearing Mr. Barker speak about the upcoming project. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rapp. Mr. Barker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple things this evening. First, I'd like to thank Director Hickman. He helped out with a need from Second Presbyterian Church in downtown Newark. So thank you for that, Director. And I know Director Rhodes, you helped as well on that. I'll echo Councilman Lang's comments regarding sheets. I've taken many phone calls, emails, some next neighborhood posts as well. We understand, and I would echo that this property is already zoned for that use. It is up to the property owner of how that property gets built out with the current zoning. So with that, I will move over, as Councilman Lang said, Newark Station, which is at 325 West Main Street. I would like to invite all of you on May 28th to the grand opening of what is called the Yard at Newark Station. It is phase one of a multi-phase project of redevelopment at the 325 West Main Street, the former Westinghouse site. And at this event, the master plan outlining the entire development project, all, I believe, 4 phases, will be unveiled for the first time to the public. It is something that we do not have in Newark. We do not have in Licking County. This is going to be something that will attract not only young and old, but also we're hoping out of county residents to come and visit Newark. The developer is fully committed. As I know, he has met many times with the mayor, Director Rhodes, Director Mauter. He's committed to Newark. And so this is something that is kind of seen to him as a legacy project for himself. He spent the last 35 years of his career driving to Columbus and retired, and has now decided that every morning he wants to drive to Newark. So it is a very exciting project. And again, May 28th, there's a Facebook event that you can register for to also get updates, as well as you can visit newark-station.com for additional updates there. I also want to echo the mayor's comments and others on the Newark girls basketball game. I watched it and was on the edge of my seat right to the end. Double overtime. It was fantastic. It was a fantastic game. They should be very proud. And I thought it very fitting that former Newark Superintendent Doug Oot was the official who gave them their trophy that night. So that was great to see. Mrs. Wycliffe, I'm glad you came and talked to us tonight about pedestrian safety. As Councilman Lang did mention, we have been working on that with Director Rhodes and Director Moorhead. We're able to allocate in the last budget some funds, and hopefully that's just a start down the road to some pedestrian safety improvements. We hope your daughter's okay. Hope she's mending well. And with that, Mr. President, I will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Mr. Blake, if it's okay with you, we could start the caucus, the Rule 11. Is that all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Janine, we have 21-11, ordinance 21-11. If you'd like to go ahead and read that.
Ordinance number 21-11 by Mr. Rath, an ordinance consenting to the annexation of certain territory generally described as being approximately 55.5 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Heard the reading of 21-11. It is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Blake.
Move to adopt 2111.
Wish to adopt it, Mr. Blake.
Second.
Second by Mr. Rath. Do we have any other discussion on 21-11? Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
Okay, 21-11 passes 9-0. Next, we have 21-12. That is the one that is the opposite of 21-11. So since 21-11 passed, it would probably be best not to pass 21-12 since that's voting no. So if there's not a motion to adopt that will just die for motion, and then we'll move on to 21-13. Janine, if you'd read 21-12.
Ordinance number 21-12 by Mr. Rath, an ordinance objecting to the annexation of certain territory generally described as being 55.5 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Heard the first reading of 21-12. It is an emergency. What is your wish? If anyone would like to make a motion to adopt this? Seeing none, that dies for lack of a motion. Next, we'll go to 21-13.
Ordinance number 21-13 by Mr. Rath, an ordinance assuming maintenance responsibility for the full width of Horns Hill Road from the existing city of Newark corporate boundaries as shown on the map attached as Exhibit A upon annexation of 55.5 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, agreeing to cooperate in the maintenance of said roadway and indemnifying the Township of Newark and Licking County and declaring an emergency.
Before the reading of 21-13, it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake.
move to adopt 21-13.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Blake,
Second.
second by Mr. Rath. Is there any discussion on 21-13? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
21-13 passes 9-0. Next, we move on to 21-16.
Resolution number 21-16 by Mr. Rath, a resolution adopting a statement indicating what services, if any, the city of Newark, Ohio will provide for approximately 55.5 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township, a territory proposed for expedited to annexation and declaring an emergency.
Heard the first reading of 21-16. It is an emergency. We are using Rule 11. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake.
move to adopt 21-16.
To adopt by Mr. Blake,
Second.
second by Mr. Rath. Is there any other discussion on 21-16? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
And 21-16 passes 9-0. And finally, this evening, we have 21-17.
Resolution number 21-17 by Mr. Rath, a resolution regarding a buffer zone for the annexation of approximately 55.5 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township and declaring an emergency.
Heard the first reading of 21-17. It is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake.
motion to adopt 21-17.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Blake,
Second.
second by Mr. Rath. Is there any other discussion on 21-17? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
And 21-17 passes 9-0. Okay, thank you, Mr. Blake. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll go ahead and call a Finance Committee meeting for April 5th on behalf of Mr. Marmee, so that's on the record. And then I guess I want to thank Director Rhodes and also Joe Paul. It was probably a few months ago, myself, Director Rhodes, Councilman Harris, I forget who all met, but we met with some residents over on Penny Avenue, and they're very concerned about a house that was just a eyesore and causing some disruption in the neighborhood. But that house is now down and demolished. And so that I know the residents there are very pleased and happy with what occurred there. So thank you, Director Rhodes, and kudos to Joe Paul and the property maintenance team there. So thank you so much. I do want to thank Deanna Wycliffe. Thank you for being on the meeting tonight. Kind of coincidentally, we had met Friday night, and we had an opportunity to briefly talk about the situation. And I will inform the rest of the members that, from the conversation that I had with Mrs. Wycliffe, that her daughter is fine. So, but she had some bruises and some minor things, but she's doing okay. But I do agree that we need to work with her to better improve the conditions along Cedar Street for children, for safety and for getting to that school. There's a large number of kids that do cross Cedar Street to get to the school back there. And we need to work with her and see what we could do to improve conditions over there. So thank you, Deanna, for being on the call tonight, and appreciate you speaking up on behalf of your daughter, but also on behalf of all the students that are over on the east side of town. I do want to announce that we have a South Newark cleanup coming up April 17th. So thank you to Director Motter for working with the South Newark Civic Association. This will be our 9th annual cleanup that we're planning to have in the South End. And one request that I have is that we're expecting to get a lot of tires, a lot of old tires. And so if people have leads on ways to dispose of tires, we'd be appreciative to get connected with you, because I know we really weren't able to have a real cleanup last year just because of the health pandemic. So we're expecting to get a lot of old tires. And so if people have ways to help us with that, that'd be appreciated. Can you mute Director Rhodes? Okay, thank you. The last comment I want to make is, kudos to all those that have been working on the Newark station. Thank you, Councilman Barker. I know I had a conversation with you about what's happening over there. It sounds like there's some great things that are going to be planned right there on West Main Street. And, there's a lot of entertainment that already happens there, a lot of nightlife that happens in that general area. But this seems like a huge improvement for not only that immediate neighborhood, but for the whole city. The only thing that I would caution, and I'm happy to work with you, is we need to reach out to the residents on West Main Street and on Jefferson Street. These residents are going to live immediately next door to this piece of property. And I know that I've received some phone calls from some people that live right on West Main Street across the street, and then also on Jefferson Street on the opposite side. So I think we need to do some outreach just to make sure that what a wonderful thing we're bringing to Newark, but we need to make sure we have some open communication with the residents that live on both those streets so that we can progress in a very positive way and no one gets any surprises, so to say. Both with the development that's going to occur, but also with the upcoming change in the boundary for the zoning for that area. So we just need to do some outreach to the immediate residents, and that's important for us to do that. And I think going through all my notes, Mr. President, I think that's, and congratulations to the girls basketball team. Did want to mention that. And that was I agree with all the other comments. Kudos to them. So with that, I'll yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. And Mr. Bub.
I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bub. Yeah, that was a tough one for the girls basketball team. Boy, so close. But, we'll have to go for next year, I guess. With that, our next full committee meeting will be on April 5th at 5:45. The next full council meeting will be that same night, April 5th, promptly at 7. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Labutus, second by Mr. Harris. All those in favor, give me a thumbs up. Anyone opposed?